straight. But I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I know it's Super Bowl Sunday and people have places to be. So, yeah. Or maybe this isn't that crowd, but Usher is doing a show later. So if anyone wants to watch Usher perform, that's tonight in the middle of the Super Bowl.
And Taylor Swift's going to be there.
Yeah. So there you go. There's a lot of reasons. I hear the commercials are good. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our operational strategic planning session. I am so excited about this whole process. So in June of last year, we passed our new mission and vision. And then the next step is we put that into practice. So that's what we're here to do today. But I am going to start with kind of grounding us on that mission and vision. Oh, is that not how you... There we go. No?
There we go.
Oh,
You had it.
I did it and then I broke it. Okay.
It's recording
Oh
your
my gosh.
words.
Okay. Oh yeah, at the bottom. There we go. All right. So this is our vision statement that we constructed and voted on as a congregation. We envision Zion Lutheran Church as a community that boldly practices the way of Jesus. As disciples liberated by the love of God, we are empowered to take action and work to meet the spiritual and daily needs of all people. Practicing the way of Jesus, we define ourselves by a nourishing relationship with God, close bonds within our worshiping community, and meaningful engagement with faith and community partners. Practicing the way of Jesus, we acknowledge our past and the history of the church, which have not always been faithful to God's vision. With this understanding, we choose to celebrate the diversity of God's kingdom by being intentionally inclusive in our decision making. That's what's happening right now. Practicing transparency and listening to all voices to better serve God and our neighbor. Practicing the way of Jesus, we embrace our Lutheran heritage, welcoming ongoing reformation and inviting the Holy Spirit to change the world through us. In this new world, Zion is a refuge where all people and all creation have dignity, hope is certain, grace abounds, all are invited, and all are needed. So, I know today this has been the theme is like turn to your neighbor and say a little something, but turn to your neighbor and what resonates with you here? Is there anything that hops out at you or is meaningful to you? Or, popcorn, maybe we're a small enough group. Anything on anyone's heart? We good, we're good.
I like that we're not about belief so much as Lutherans have been traditionally. We believe, we believe, we believe. We practice the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
I like the emphasis being on that rather than belief.
I like the hope is certain and grace abounds. That sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also like all are needed.
Yeah,
The whole last sentence.
Yeah,
invited.
strong one. Yeah. Yeah, a couple things I want to point out that to me are meaningful. This is like full of change, right? Like practice means change. And change, everyone hates change. It's just kind of a reality when you're trying to work. Yeah, but we hate it, we don't really think about it. But in reality, we know that we need it and we want it and it's the only constant, other than the love of God and all those things. So this is just full of that. And I just really love that, we as a community are so ready. That we know that church is changing and we want to be part of that. I also love that relationship is so central, that we define ourselves by our relationship with God and other people. So we're going to be getting into strategic planning, which can sometimes feel, I think, if you've done it with different places where it feels very mechanical and numeric. But at the center of all of this, it's all about relationships. So if you don't mind me editorializing a little bit, I don't necessarily believe that everyone needs to be a member at Zion. I don't know that we're the community that everybody out in the world needs, but I know that there are people out there who need what's happening here. And so it's important to me that when we're having authentic relationships with people and we want what's best for them spiritually, sometimes that's going to mean inviting them into our church, which can be awkward, I think, as well. But we're saying if the relationship is authentic, that it's going to happen, and we need to be ready for that and ready to welcome people in. So I think also as we do this strategic planning stuff, sometimes it is going to feel a little foreign when we're talking about metrics for how many people are engaged. We don't like to judge our activity by that kind of thing traditionally, but it is an important indicator because people respond to that which they need. And so when we're seeing deep engagement and it's been wonderful seeing so many new families in the pews and in our classes and all that, it's because good things are happening at Zion. So I think we need to embrace that too. And I really love that that's central to our vision, is that we want to bring people in and let them get the things that they need to spiritually fulfill them. Yeah, so I think there's a lot here that we can keep digging into, but it's important that we have our eyes on this vision as we do our strategic planning, that this is the world that we're trying to create. is one where all are invited and all are needed. We do know that. So we want to involve everyone in this process. So as we talk today about what the process is going to look like, have your mind on the future. That's the whole idea. And obviously we're going to talk about different sessions we're going to do around our pillars, which actually does bring me to our mission and core practices. So mission statement, I hope you've all heard it a million times by now, is to boldly practice the way of Jesus. And I love how our pastors and our leadership team have just been like really bringing that into the conversation at every level, trying to boldly practice. And we had identified core practices as a community. So those are worshiping, equipping, serving, and connecting. So that's how we're going to sort of like structure all this conversation around strategic planning. And just as sort of a reminder, this is your worship, equip, serve, and connect. That we had kind of put some language to try to think about, again, our vision for what this is going to look like in action. I'm not going to read through all of them right now. But I think one of the beautiful things that we're going to keep getting into today too is that like there is so much overlap in all these things. They're not silos. These are pillars. This is what's holding up our church. These are the things that we're here to do and be, but obviously we're all moving around the building. There's so much wonderful stuff happening. So that's why we're really going to invite folks into every step of that process. Wherever you feel like you have a voice to add, we want you there. So with that sort of grounding in our mission and vision, I'm going to hand over to Sheila, who we have been so lucky. Definitely the Holy Spirit was in the timing of bringing her to Zion, like during this time of transition. So she's going to talk through like what strategic planning looks like in the system that we're using. But with all of it, obviously we want to keep our hearts and minds on why it is that we're here, our mission. We're here to boldly practice. So really appreciate people being brave and taking this step and helping us to really move our congregation forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending your afternoon before the Super Bowl here, and well, I should say before Taylor Swift. So let's just be honest. We want to watch Taylor Swift. But I was going to give you a little bit of background about myself, and then I would like to know a little bit about you and what you know about strategic planning, because that will help me in making sure we're going on this path together. And I'm not talking at you, we are talking together. So my background is marketing, communication, strategic planning. I've done this work I did it for 40 years. I am retired theoretically. And been all over the country. From Texas, I survived. Went to Washington, D.C., survived again. Went to Kansas City where I met my husband and stuff, but I actually have a master's degree in this stuff, so it's helpful for you to know. My goal is to help shepherd. It's not to tell you what to do or tell us what to do. My husband and Peter and I have joined the church, which is wonderful. We've only been in this area about 3 years, so baby steps. Before I get started, how many of you have participated in a strategic planning process before? Okay. I promise you it's going to be different how we're going to do this today. Mainly because, as I shared with Emmeline and Ron and Bob Thompson, who served on this committee also, and Pastor Greer and Pastor Jim, he hasn't come back, is that you're going to benefit from my 40 years of doing dumb stuff. I'm going to try to do the smarter pieces here. And we have streamlined this. I think that'll help make a lot of sense. And the one piece about all of this that I thank you so much, Emmeline, for using the word change, because the one thing that Jesus was a change agent, right? Jesus was and is a change agent. And this has been an ongoing tension in my 44-year marriage. I'm the change agent in our family. My husband is the one who's, well, let's go look at the money. Let's go look at this. I'm like, no, let's just go. Let's go. So that's our message is Jesus says, let's go. He's not saying how much or how it's going to happen. He's just like, do it. So that's our job. Our job is to do it. And we talk about this. So, but in order to get this done, we do have to have structure. And if you have had a previous experience with with a strategic plan, I guarantee you they did not call it operational, right? Have you had anybody ever call it operational strategic plan? No, because Most strategic plans I have ever done, they spend a ton of money, they get this beautiful plan and they put it in a drawer. That doesn't get us anywhere, does it? That, at the end of the day, or, as Pastor Jim says, became his to-do list. And he's like, seriously, people? This is not good. So our job as members of this church and representatives trying to live boldly the way Jesus did is to operationalize and make it happen. Whatever we come up with here needs to be able to happen. So one of my jobs is to say, when we start brainstorming in our small groups, is if somebody has an idea, great, how are you gonna do it? How does it happen? These wonderful, beautiful words, worthless if we can't make it work. So some of this means we'll have to streamline a tiny bit maybe, and maybe pick smaller things that we can build on, rather than say, we're gonna save the world. That's impossible. Does that all make sense to everybody? Are you feeling energized? Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is, all right, now here's the boring part, and I'm sorry about this, but I have to put this up here so you understand the mechanism that will keep us in line. So you can have a racehorse, but the racehorse still has to have reins, right? To go down and not like run into all the other racehorses and they all fall down. So our job is, I'm gonna talk about the operational strategic plan, how we set the guiding structure that just keeps us in our lanes. Conducting a SWOT. Has anyone conducted a SWOT before? Does anyone know what SWOT is? Okay, Dave, what's a SWOT?
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and
Threats.
threats, yes.
Okay, so we're gonna do mini SWOTs in each of the groups for each of our core ministry areas. The big group, our kind of guiding group, we did this SWOT before we started this because it helps you figure out what's reasonable. So we will go through that and I'll explain what that means. How we set up an OSP framework and then building off our working framework. So a lot of fancy words, but I trust they'll make sense. All right, does anyone know about goals, objectives, strategies, tactics? Management by objective. This is standard business operation stuff, management by objective, which means you have a goal to start. I'm just putting these up as explanations for you, and there's no paper, and if you have questions, stop me and I'll explain it or I'll add my ideas. But if you have additional thoughts, jump in. That's perfectly okay. So the first one is a goal. Now, goals are based on our vision and our mission statement and our 4 mission pillars that were adopted. Those are all going to be pushed out by those guiding documents. The objectives make the goals measurable. So here's a little test. You cannot have a goal that you cannot measure. Okay? So if we cannot measure it, we are not putting it on the list. Because you have to be able to measure it in some way. Why do we measure anything? We measure it to know if we're on the right path. And if we're not coming close, then we either have to review the goal, we have to review how we're measuring. There's some element that's not working. So again, it's just a way for us to test whether we're doing the right thing. So that's important. Strategies. These operationalize the objectives. So they're used to measure, budget, and manage our process. And I know this budget word right here, one of the reasons we moved our planning into the spring so we can budget for 2025. Because by the time we got through the first set of these, the budget had already been done for 24. And if you don't want to do unfunded mandates. Who's heard about that from government recently, right? That's pretty standard. It's so frustrating. We don't want to do that. We don't want to set ourselves up to fail on the front end by not putting the proper dollars to whatever it is we decide to do. Okay, and then the tactics those are the activities. And I usually say tactics are things you can put on a calendar. So you can actually put a time and a date, and here's how we're going to do it. And that all works from there. Has anyone here done a Gantt chart before? James, you're doing it. Dave, yeah, a Gantt chart is a beautiful thing, and I will tell you it's very, very functional. It's a chart, and you'll see it when we work in the small groups. I'll bring examples for how we'll build this. But it actually overlays in color bars where the efforts are, and it's such a great visual because you say, oh my goodness, look how much is lumped into one time of the year. Right? So we either need more resources, more people, more something, because if you don't properly resource, it won't happen. But if you don't see it, that's where you don't say, oh my gosh, we got James doing 4 things. That's not even feasible. So again, it's just properly putting it together. So it's taking tactics, we itemize what we're going to do. This is really, people think this is the important thing. No, this is the rubber meeting the road. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna do it? How's it gonna be funded? Who's going to do it? And then how are we gonna measure? Okay, that's the timeline, the Gantt chart I talked about there. And then the budget, again, we have to take all of this stuff, put it into a budget. And I would recommend, we talked about, when you think budget, what do you think about? Money, right? However, we have additional resources called people. And that's why I say human capital. Because in our church, as in any nonprofit that is really run by the people, that's as big a budget aspect as the dollars. So unless you have I guess we had Bill Gates or somebody like that just gave us $1 billion and we could pay people to do all this stuff, but that's not how our church works. And that's not how Jesus worked either. Jesus worked with disciples. He handed jobs out to people. Go out and do this. That's our job, right? And then at the end of the day, we will evaluate. And I know people hate that, but there's a reason why we do an evaluation. It's not to point fingers, and it's not to say it's a bad idea. It's just to spend our energy where it really matters. And the universe will tell us if something's working or not. In your measurement, it'll tell us right away. No, within 3 months, if we're trying to do something and it's just not gaining traction, let's do something else. Don't do that anymore. Don't spend your time on something that's making you crazy. Any questions on management by objective? You're all excited about management by objective. Yay! I've got converts. Okay. So the next one is the guiding structure. So thank you again, Emmeline, for talking about our vision, because this is a classic setup. Vision leads to mission. There's our boldly practice the way of Jesus, which I don't know if there's any other mission I've ever heard of that is more daunting than that mission. I come in here every day and I read it and I think, sure, and I go back home and I make, edamame or something. But, I mean, that is way hard. He sets a bar that is unobtainium, as my son used to say, Mom, that's unobtainium. So, we're gonna try hard to take the un part off and make it obtainium as much as possible, as much as we can. And you beautifully laid this out. The reason I told Pastor Jim I'd be happy to work with you guys is that, oh my gosh, you already did so much of the work as a church. You've already gotten so close here. So you've beautifully broken this into 4 very workable areas. The 4 pillars: worship, equip, connect, and serve. Because they all line up so nicely. We kind of think about it, when we were talking as a leadership team, as a funnel. So we're worshiping together, and then we move out to equipping our people, and then we connect to the next level, and then we serve. So it's this really wonderful funnel, taking what we learn and moving it out to the community. Does that make sense to everybody? Can you visualize that? Are you feeling like you're a funnel? Do you feel like you're a funnel today? Okay. So here's the SWOT, which we'll talk about this when we meet in our small groups on the worship, equip, connect, and serve. And the strengths and weaknesses, we will look at that internally, what we consider to be the strengths for Zion and what are the challenges. I sometimes use challenges instead of weakness, but it doesn't work with the acronym. But what are our strengths and what are our challenges? And internally, what is right inside Zion? And then the opportunities and threats are outside of us. Some are really big, like what's happening with the Christian faith right now. Emmeline brought that up. I mean, we have some massive issues with what's going on with the Christian faith and how people are perceiving it. So how do we address those? You can't act like they're not there. And how do we try to address that? So, you know, in our way. And, you know, the opportunities, there are lots of great opportunities. Not just being in Ann Arbor, you know, Ron often brings forward, we have a wealth of talent here. How do we leverage it? How do we activate it? How do we bring it into our church and our mission and our vision? So that's the approach for that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we get to the small group, we will be talking about that in just within the core areas that we'll be working on, which will be worship, equip, connect, and serve. So setting up an OSP framework. So there are a lot of ways to create a strategic plan, and I decided to offer up, and the group agreed, that we would go toward a marketing language, which seems odd, but it is a nice way to frame it out, to make it operational. One thing about marketing that works, I've learned in 40 years, is you know what you're doing, it gets done, right? So we are actually setting it up. Originally, it would be number one is the 4 Ps are typically product, price, place, and promotion. We changed it to program because it felt better for us, and it's still a P, and we don't care. It's our documenting. We can do what we want. So the program is physical or digital or virtual, tailored to audience segments. That's what a program is. So audience segments, we have a lot of audiences. We'll talk about those in a minute. Price is relative value. People often think of price as what?
Money.
Money. But money often is the least amount of the price of an activity. We will think, oh, it costs $15. Well, no, it does, but you have to go clear across town to get it. You have to do that during rush hour. You have to go behind 16 buildings. You can't find it. So if we're talking about just a product, per se, the price may just be so high that you won't do that anymore. So price, we are going to think about that in a broad way, not just the dollars. Things do cost money, but we are going to try to look at this in a broader way, especially with the church, because the price here is often human capital. We have to think about that. And we have to say, how hard is it? And Emmeline, I keep picking on you, bless your heart. Are you my beautiful example? Because she says, very honestly, you know, on Sunday morning, I have to decide to get up. And then I have to get cleaned up. And it's my only day off, really, because people work now 6 days a week, essentially. And it's a cost. It's a cost to come here. And I, you know, especially if it's snowing, you're like, really? Wait, it's online. So, you know, I can watch it online. It's less costly than coming here. And that is actually showing up in our numbers. And when we get to that, get to that small group, you'll start to see where some of this is, the price is having an effect of people's behavior on what they decide to do. Place, okay, so this is universal, place is virtual or in person. So we have that here, and we've talked about how to address that, how to maximize it, right? How to maximize the fact that we have more than one place, and they're all good. So how do we make them even better? So that's the kind of the place we're looking at that. And then promotion. And promotion's very broad. You see, that's the longest line, because there's so many ways to promote. The piece that I didn't put in there, because I guess I have personal sales. When I put the quotes around that, I mean, sales isn't necessarily getting something to buy something. I want us not think about it in a commercial sense, but in an emotional sense. So we can get someone to buy into what we believe and buy into coming with us rather than buy it. Does that make sense? They become emotionally engaged and invested. So that's the piece of that. And influencers and champions, that you are the influencers and champions. Do you feel like an influencer? On TikTok? Or a champion? The leaders, people who say, why do I go to Zion? I go because, and you're not afraid to tell your neighbor at the neighborhood party, I go to Zion Church. Are you interested in coming with me? I'd like you to find out more about it, if they seem like they're interested in talking about it. Not being afraid to say that. Okay, so we actually have made some progress in taking this and applying it to Zion. So we have worship. We have 3 types of worship. We have traditional, modern, and virtual. And we actually thought a little bit, we talked about just having it as 2 types, which would be in person or virtual. But we thought about it some more, and we think that traditional worship and modern worship are significantly different. And they attract different types of folks who'd like to come and worship with us. So we thought we needed to elevate each of them and spend time and energy making sure those are the best they can be to bring the most people here, because that's the goal. And then virtual worship, this is an interesting piece for us to talk about. When we get to the small group, I'm gonna leave this up for a little bit so we can chat as a group. I wanted to let you know an interesting fact. The National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., has anyone been there? Okay, we used to be a member there years ago. And their worship is spectacular. They had a person, a deacon, that's her only job, was to plan the worship. Because it's the National Cathedral. They've just hired a deacon to do their virtual worship. That's all she's doing. That's what's happening. So part of it is us keeping our ear to the ground, what's going on in other places. And I guarantee you, if we called her up, she would talk to us. I guarantee it. I'm gonna do it. Hey, what you doing in there? How can we use some of what you're learning? They have a lot of money. Just let's jump onto their bandwagon. They have a big congregation nationally. You sometimes watch it, it's really fascinating. So I want you to know that's a big important piece here, and especially when we see the numbers for the worship team, they're bigger numbers than we have in person. Part of our job is to get them to move sometimes to come to see us in person. But that may be the only way they ever engage with Zion. And that's okay if we embrace them and they become part of us. And they're not just out there in the ether, someplace we don't even know who they are. So there are lots of opportunities there. Equip, adult education. Do we have our adult education person here? Is that you, Ron? Okay, Ron, and then of course, I see you, yes. We got 2 youth education folks here, which is fabulous. So that's core. Jesus was all about teaching. He was often called teacher. So that's really important to what we're doing. And part of our job is to sort out how this works with this, right? You'll start to see the overlap. When Ron comes up and starts talking about where do you guys all fit, you're gonna go, I fit everywhere, right? That's what we finally came down to. We're like, wait a minute, there, oh, just put it both places, right? Connect. Some of this, as I said, this is beautiful bifurcation. I screwed it up by saying, let's do 3 for worship because, the world loves bifurcation. But we have new members and we have current members. In the marketing world, these are called retention and recruitment, right? You've heard those terms before? Okay. And this, theoretically, it's the 80-20 rule that seems to be applied to everything in the universe. So you spend 80% of your energy here, 20% of your energy there, because if you keep one person, they bring more people. So the rule of thumb for current members is you turn them into recruiters. They then bring new members who then become current members who, what do? Become recruiters. So that's the cycle that we want to try to build, is people who get so excited about Zion that they want to go like in the grocery store and they'll say, you want to come to my church? I bet you someone's going to do that someday. Okay, and then finally, this brings us down to serve. And again, we did a bifurcation. And it's really just to help us try to get our arms around all the stuff Zion does and make sure we're doing what makes the most sense for this church. So the first one is Zion projects. And that only means projects that are owned and operated by Zion. Does that make sense to everybody? So they're going out. The second one is community projects. Those are owned and operated by an external partner, and Zion comes in as support. So, for example, when we have the shut-ins, they don't call it that.
Rotate shelter, yeah.
Rotational shelter. That's Zion supporting an external partner, right? That's really an external partner. We're coming in underneath and we're giving that wings. So that's our job. But then Zion projects could be, who can throw one out that's a Zion project?
Foster Care Christmas.
Foster Care Christmas. Zion identified, Zion driven. You go out and we find partners, right? The Blavin Scholars, etc. But Zion's running it. And we're coming up, they're coming underneath of us. So just as, who's in charge? That make sense to everybody? Okay. Alrighty, so we have here our 4 dates. Wednesday, the 21st of February. And we did Wednesdays because for the church calendar that seemed to be a fairly open time. And we were doing 7 o'clock to accommodate our folks who are still working. So we think it'll be 7 to 9. But that's with us coming prepared, working ready to work, and moving right along. So our goal is to get through, for each of these areas in one session, our plan, which means we're not going to build every single thing out. We will build out the core functions for that plan. And the goal, again, we're going to make it so that we're not overreaching, because the first thing that makes a strategic plan fail is it's too big and too unwieldy, and we don't accomplish what we wanted to do. So now the fun begins. How are we doing? We're doing good. We might get out of here early. Okay. All right. So, let's see, that's not the list,
I took the list off because I think that Ron wanted us to interactively decide who was gonna fall in what category. Right, is that right, Ron?
Yeah.
okay, okay. So now Ron is in charge.
Or Ron, do you want me to pull up what we brainstormed?
Yeah.
Or at least, yeah, pull it up here.
right, so there are 4 of those areas, and we sat down and walked through where we thought we all might live. But that doesn't mean that's the last word, because what we're really looking for is your engagement. For you to say, you know, I actually think I need to be here and here. And you're all welcome to come to all of them. There are no artificial boundaries here. There are no X's that say you can't come to if you want to come to the education, you could one, then come to that. I think that would be perfectly fine. Not a problem at all.
Oh, you already got it.
We'll just leave that up there, so we have something to look at. Any questions for anyone before I turn it over to Ron? Are you all excited? Yahoo! We love this, we love this, this is a lot of fun. We're gonna end up with a wonderful product and it'll help us go to the next level, so. Okay, handing it over to you,
All right.
Dr. Delph.
Can you bring up the slide with pillars on it with all of the ministries and groups and committees showing? I passed out a hard copy of that so that you folks can write down on it, but we also will use the one up here.
I'm sorry, Ron, I pulled the who was under what category out, because I
You
thought
did?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I maybe misunderstood the email thread that we had
no.
going.
Well, that's a good thing I made a hard copy. of
Yeah,
it.
so thank you for
All right, well, okay, so the first thing is, take a look at that, the 4 pillars there and find your group, find your committee, find whatever you're involved with, and think about it. Think about where we put this. The members of the strategic planning committee, we did the best we could, but remember, you're the ones that are on the committee. So this is more a suggestion than anything else. And one of the things that you should keep in mind is that we fully expect that you are going to make relations and connections both vertically as well as horizontally with other groups and with other committees and other staff people on here. But in trying to discern why we put a particular ministry or a particular group in a particular place, it would help, I think, if we look, for instance, under worship. One of the things that we really worked hard to do as we were coming up with these pillars or these values or these goals was to root these in Scripture. You know, what, in other words, what is our justification for doing this? In worship, Psalms 150, verse 6, it says, "Let everything that breathes praise the Lord." So, okay, so we're going to do that. We talked about this, and worship is a sacred time to immerse ourselves in the love of God. And at Zion, we embrace our Lutheran heritage of grace and love for all people while striving to provide diverse worship opportunities to praise God and find new life, new values, new commitment to the living Word. And when you think about worship at Zion, I'm sure that the first thing you think about is the sanctuary downstairs. But as Sheila was saying, that's sort of the end product, right? You don't have a worship service on Sunday morning without a lot of people working behind the scenes. That's if you've ever spent any time at Zion at all, you realize that there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of people and groups and associations working behind the scenes that you have no idea that they're there, but if they weren't there, boy, would you miss them, you know? It's the same sort of a thing when you think about worship. And so when we were thinking about this, when we were thinking about, well, what goes under, the pillar of worship, we were thinking, what does it take to have worship in the sanctuary? And of course, you've got to have the worship core ministry, but you've also, the personnel committee is involved in that as well, because they think about, well, what kind of staff should we hire, right? We need somebody to lead the praise band in the morning, and we need somebody up there who is going through the slides, who is keeping, hopefully in tune with the verses. So we put IT in there, we put the music ministries in there. Buildings and grounds, that, obviously, that goes without saying. They have a say in what the sanctuary looks like, keeping the sanctuary functioning and up to date. The wedding coordinator, a part of this is we're thinking about, you know, what goes on in the sanctuary, and of course, weddings go on in the sanctuary. But also, that's where many of the sacraments are carried out, and the wedding's a sacrament as well. So we put the wedding coordinator there. The finance committee, it takes a lot of money to put one of these services together on a Sunday morning. And the altar guild, of course, that's another natural one as well. So this was our thought process as we were, you know, what does it take to actually achieve something like this? So I would be interested in can everybody that's out there, everybody find your committee, well, I want to know who's not happy with where they are. Or not only that, some of these people, like IT, it's amazing. Apparently, we can't function without IT anymore because they're all the way across the board. Do any of you think that you need to be listed other places in addition to where you are? Marcus, you can see the archival committee. We've got you in a couple of places there under both Equip as well as Serve. And our thinking there was, when you think about Equip, part of what's going on there is in an educational fashion, but our history, we need to know our history, where we've come from, right? In order to know why we are what we are right now and why we do what we do. But at the same time, if you think about Serve, what has Zion done in the past to serve other people? So that's, that's why when we're thinking about, where does Marcus go? That's what our thought process was. Yes,
I want
please.
to note, I think that Serve and Connect might have gotten swapped. I think we might have
Yeah, I
had
was
two
gonna
systems.
say
Oh, did we? Okay.
I think they did. So if you just want
Alright.
to switch those in your head.
We're in everything except the web place.
Okay, so
Bottom two
Connect and
boxes.
Serve, all right.
Yeah, bottom two boxes on the right. Just switch
Good.
those.
Okay,
Yep.
that's better.
That was a mental
All right, now
challenge.
everybody happy about that. Okay, yeah, Julie.
I know you guys have spent so much more time thinking about this, and I appreciate the visual of a funnel, and I can't help but think about like young discipleship, whether it's children's or youth ministry, being a part of connecting. How that becomes a bit of an outreach in some ways to outside of these walls. So yes, we're equipping the people that are here, but we're also working to expand beyond and
Sure.
connect. So, I think there's, like you said, they're all interconnected. There's all crossing
Okay.
all over. So and I don't know if adult ed, sometimes, there might be moments of that too that feels maybe a little more isolated. But I think about VBS. I think about some of these events that Brandon's planning with the youth and how they're, connection points for kids to bring friends to.
Sure,
So.
yeah. No, that's good. I absolutely agree with that. That's wonderful. One of the things that you need to think about, because you can see, this makes much more sense when you look at the dates, right? Because this is, those committees and groups and personnel and staff that come under worship are all going to come together on February 21st at 7 o'clock. And within your own group, within your own committee, your own ministry, you're going to think about how can we, what do we want to do? How do we want to fulfill this pillar right here? You're going to have to identify what your goal is, and then you're going to have to identify, well, if that's our goal, what's our overall strategy to get there? And then underneath that, well, what are the tactics that we're going to use in order to implement that strategy, right? Does that make sense? Okay. But in doing that, you shouldn't think about, well, we have to do this by ourselves. Look at all of these other committees and look at all of these other, all the other personnel right there. And I would encourage you to think about collaborating with other, again, you can move horizontally or you can move vertically as far as these pillars go. One of the things that you'll want to do before you actually meet, before you actually come together is, already start talking within your core committee or within your group. Well, what is our objective? Really, what do we want to do? And you can have, certainly have more than one, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to, have 4 impossible goals. It's better to have maybe 1 or 2 to start out. But that's one of the things that you should start thinking about is, well, if I find myself under worship, how is it that my group or my committee or the staff position that I have and the other people around me how is it that we can contribute to worship, and what is our goal in contributing to worship? So that's how you need to start thinking about this, and then how do you implement that sort of a thing? And apparently, money is no object at this point. You really, I mean, seriously, you just, think big, and take it from there. Yes, please, Heather?
Are all of these teams and committees, are they all active current meetings that we?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
alright. Cause I'm not familiar with all of them, so.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, you really say, wow, really?
And this isn't even everything. There are others that are sort of like nested within things that
Yeah.
exist on this list, like subgroup committee. We are quite a vast network of
Yeah,
activity.
it
and
is.
design.
It's sort of humbling when you think about it, that, we all have our own little thing that we're working away on, and we never get the big picture, but boy, when you look at it, wow, it takes a village to run this place. Okay, any other questions, or, and again, if you look at this and you think, well, I'm happy with where we are, but we also, as Julie said, well, maybe we ought to think about being over there, that's fine,
Just let us
put
know.
yourself where you're comfortable
Yeah,
with
let
and where
us
you think
know
you can
which
do the
one-
most good.
Yeah, where you wanna be, just let us know that, and then we'll make sure you have whatever we have on that. And I was gonna add into what Ron said, thank you, you did a great job, is, the question is primary, what's your primary focus, what's your primary function, and then secondary. So what you're saying, Julie, is you may want to have 4 times a year a youth service, right, where the youth drive it and the youth come and they bring all their buddies from high school and or junior high or whatever, and then that's the youth service, but then that's collaborative with the worship group versus running it every day. You're not running every Sunday, you see what I'm saying? So some of it, think through how you might interact with another pillar, and then say, am I primary on that, or would I come into them with an idea? We're not gonna stop having ideas that someone else is going to have to work with you on, right? So, cause I remember a church that we attended in Texas, they had quarterly youth, they ran the entire ministry, the show for the worship, that whole Sunday. And it was always, and like literally adults step back. And it was very interesting. You had to let go as the adults. And they came up with some really cool stuff. Man, that was fun, So sometimes it's getting out of your own comfort zone, saying, let the kids do it. Let the, eventually they're gonna get it anyway. So maybe let them start now. But again, there'll be a secondary piece, but you'd have to go to them to implement. That makes sense? Anybody else have a question like that?
I have a question
Yeah.
on just, we used to do time and talent a long time ago. I don't know when the last time we ever did one here. And
You need a survey?
how to even find who's interested in what. There's really no ministry on this list that, focuses on that.
Or you mean a survey of the membership?
Yeah, I mean,
Jim
we used
was
to.
talking once recently about doing that with stewardship, weren't you?
Yep.
That part of our stewardship, not just getting a pledge for how much money you're gonna give.
Right.
What
We used to
time?
do it annually with the pledges.
Right.
At one of our churches, it was, hey, it's time to, put your faith down and, what are you interested in? Where can you serve outside of just the money? Like you keep bringing up, it's not just the money, it's what can you do?
So I would suggest that falls in Connect. I think that's a core function of the Connect worship pillar, of the Connect pillar.
And I agree, it's just that
Right. So that would be.
it's not listed here and it's
Well,
not
that's it, you're
active.
right. So what I think you're saying, Dave, is you're looking for some of the strategies and tactics to operationalize it. That's operationalizing. So Valerie and I, because I'm gonna be in your committee, we're gonna build out a survey, because I already told you I would do it, but we're gonna build out, and it may be a simple monkey survey. But it's here, what do we do? What do you like to do? How do you work with us? And what talents can you bring to share? So if we don't know that, we can't connect. So again, that's a core strategy that will have to, it's a program that we're gonna run through on the strategies, that gets plugged in. So you're right, we've actually talked about surveying and stuff on our team, but we actually have a pillar that does that. But we have to know, because for the rest of the team, you need to know, what are my resources?
Right,
Right.
well,
Right.
just finding new members
Right,
for a committee when we've
Right.
had, at least on the endowment, there's 4 people that
right,
are off.
exactly. So we have to know who's willing to help and,
Right.
you know, who can you squeeze, basically.
I mean, James does a good job. He got my wife driving the van. You know,
Well, because he lives it, you know, I mean, some of it is personified, and some of it is, how do we even lift up the leadership? So maybe we even do quarterly leadership RAWA meetings where everybody gets excited and figures out the next thing to do, and how do you get someone to join you? The classic is Mark Twain, you know, what happened with Tom Sawyer. How did he get his fence painted? He made it so much fun. Everyone else wanted to grab a brush. So we're painting a fence here. But we're just gonna grab a brush and say, why wouldn't you wanna paint with me? Of course you want to paint with me. It's like the coolest thing ever. So that's our job, is to live it in a way. And how did Jesus, I mean, you know, I can't speak for Jesus, but I read a lot. He just made it look like so much fun. How would 5,000 people sit on a hill and listen to him and starve until they got a bunch of fish? And well, that was kind of good. The fish was good. But you know, it's just clearly charismatic. So that's part of our job, is how do we build that sense of energy and fun? And a plan really helps. It seems boring, but I'll tell you what, it's just going to focus us. It helps us focus. And say, we're going to do 3 things, and we're going to do the heck out of them. And they're going to be great. So we're working our energy.
We'll evaluate in 3 months.
Yeah, we'll evaluate 3 months, and it's the wrong 3 things, we pick 3 other things. But that's okay. I mean, I think, you know, Jesus tried a bunch of stuff. You think of all the cool stuff he did. It just, he told us all the time how to do this. So it's not like we don't have a model. Anyway, so don't be afraid to put yourself with other groups, but just think, what's my primary focus here? And if you need more help, like Valerie and I, we're gonna ask you to come on Connect, right?
Or Diane's on the team.
See, Diane's on it too. We're gonna say, who else wants to be on? We're just gonna start, come on with us. We're gonna have the best team anyway, just saying. Okay.
All right. Well, that's all of the content that we have planned for today. I will say, so the idea with this session today is that we wanted to introduce the process so that at each of these 4 meetings, we don't have to do 45 minutes on how strategic planning works. But for that to be successful, we need this information to get to the people who you're working with on your teams and your committees. So we have a video recording that's going to go out today, but please put this on your agendas. If you have a meeting that has an agenda, and encourage people to engage with this information, to come to the sessions. It's only going to be as successful as the amount of engagement that we get, because, you know, again, we're not making a checklist for our pastors, we're making a plan for our community. So we really want everyone to be involved. Any members of our committee are available for your questions. That's myself, Sheila, Ron, our pastors, and Bob Thompson. So please approach us. If one of us coming to your committee meeting first would be helpful, I'm sure that many of us would be very willing to do that, to give a mini version of this. But I am just so excited. I think there is really good energy in the congregation right now. And if we can really be that funnel, we can serve so many people who need this connection, who need to be equipped, who need to be served and to serve. So again, our vision statement, everyone is invited and everyone's needed. We can't do this without the whole team. And so we're just really, really excited. So thank you for coming today. You are the influencers and champions. We really do appreciate you. But yeah, hopefully we'll see you in the coming weeks. So thank you everyone so much. Oh yeah, any final questions? Or?
You have 4 meetings starting at 7.
Yes.
Do you have an estimate for each meeting?
We're saying 2 hours-ish. Yeah, so I think probably plan for that. Yeah, and these are gonna be down in the garden room. So.
Go ahead.
Oh. Anything else? No?
Any
Alright,
other
we're good.
questions or comments or?
You know, one thing we didn't do today, I know just about everyone in this room, but we didn't do
Oh,
introductions.
that's
and
good.